Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark. Before we get started today, I want you guys to remember to go over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Super Brand Publishing. All the interviews you are listening to here, if you're listening to the podcast, are over there, and you get to see all of these people in their live glory over there. Also, don't forget to go over and take the Promote, Profit, Publish quiz. You can find that at www.promoteprofitpublishquiz.com. Find out if you're really ready to publish. I know a lot of you guys have written books and you didn't build a platform. And so we don't want another failed product. We want followers. We want people who buy the book. We want people who will buy your programs and services, because believe it or not, that book is not going to retire you to the island next to Richard Branson's. It's the products and services that will. So today's guest is a return guest. Elizabeth Bachman is the go-to person for advanced level training in speaking, presentation, skills, sales, and leadership. With a lifetime spent perfecting the art of presenting, she helps high-level clients master a message that brings the funding they need and the allies they want and the recognition they deserve. A sought-after speaker and strategist in the Silicon Valley, nationally and internationally recognized, Elizabeth works with leaders and influencers who need to become concise and compelling presenters. She helps them present as smart, down-to-earth, loose, friendly, even funny, and still be taken seriously. You know, nobody likes to sit through that boring presentation. So Elizabeth is also the host of an international podcast called Speakers Who Get Results, where she interviews experts on presentation skills, leadership, visibility, and cross-cultural communication. Having spent over 30 years directing such luminaries as, I always say this, Luciano Pavarotti. Did I say it right?
Yep, Luciano Pavarotti. Yep.
I said, I can't say it like her. I can't roll those T's. And Placido Domingo in more than 50 operas around the world. Elizabeth brings a wealth of tools to help business professionals become respected presenters. She is fluent in 5 languages, and unlike me, one of those isn't cussing. She brings her global experience to all of her clients. So welcome, Elizabeth. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. And in terms of the language of cussing, I am fairly fluent in cussing, and I'm really fluent in bad jokes and dirty jokes, and no one tells dirty jokes anymore. And which I'm not going to do on this podcast, but I really miss sitting around telling dirty jokes, and we're too politically correct now to.
I do too, and I'm so shocked to hear you say politically correct, because you're so much more politically correct than I am. But yes, I miss, you know what? Here's the one thing that will never be offensive: blonde jokes.
Exactly.
And
you
I'm
and I
a
are
blonde.
both blondes.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm a blonde, so go away. Take them away, because there are a lot of really dumb blondes out there, and we all get it. But yeah.
Well, and we're smart blondes who are thought to be dumb blondes, or sensitive about being maybe considered a dumb blonde.
I'm not sensitive about it. I've actually used it to my advantage at times, you know, like that look. Like,
well, I grew up as a flower child, and I just, you know, took a long time to get me to convince people that there was a brain in there. Because I did like having the long hair and the flowers and the tie-dye skirts and so forth. So
okay. So is it a pot smoking thing, or just a easy breezy? Like, she's like, I did not inhale in college.
Of course I did. Of course I did. Yeah, we used to actually get stoned and listen to opera. I had a friend who would sort of host us all in his dorm room. And I must say, you know, the riddle scene from Turandot or the anvils from Götterdämmerung, when you're stoned, it's really quite a remarkable experience. It's great stone music.
There's something you never thought you'd hear on a podcast. Wow.
And here I am trying to be so businesslike.
I know.
I've totally given it away.
I had such other stoner music when I was in college. It was not opera.
Well, we had there was a lot of other music, but there was a group of us that were opera fans. So, yep.
Okay. All right. So you grew up an actress too. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I started in theater when I was 5 years old, And my mom said I was the best goddamn bunny rabbit to ever grace the stage of the hillside school. And I said, oh, I like that. So I graduated from bunny rabbits onto other things, and then realized in college that, I was really actually a better director than I was an actor. I like telling people what to do.
So was the moral of that story that your mom might have been smoking a little bit of something back then?
I think my mom just was proud of me no matter what I did.
Okay. So, all right. Just checking.
But, so I was 5. So, that who knows what was really going on.
So how did you get into opera? This is so interesting because I've never had any inkling to get into opera at all. How did you get there?
Well, my parents loved listening to it. So we listened to opera at home, and the Metropolitan Opera radio broadcasts every Saturday that we listened every Saturday. And when I actually started to work at the Metropolitan Opera, some years after the Bunny Rabbit, but I started to work at the Metropolitan Opera, and they took me on the tour of how do you find your way around that very complicated building. And I saw the place where they record the opera quiz. And it was like, oh, the opera quiz. I always wanted to win the opera quiz. So childhood training.
Okay. So for those of you guys who know me, I grew up in a very small town, and our songs were Tulsa Time. So Johnny Cash. So you can see that people can be friends from very different backgrounds here.
Yes.
This is great. So on from there, you're going around right now. One of the main focuses of what you're doing is talking about 11 tips for better virtual presentations, because pretty much everybody has had to make that transition from being really engaging on stage to going out and doing this virtually.
11 tips was not necessarily what I was going to talk about, but I can if you
Okay.
All right. So how to get the best online gigs, but I can do 11 tips. That works.
Okay, let's do the online gigs.
The tips are part of that. Anyway.
Okay. All right. So right now you have been talking a lot out there because of the shift we've made in the from the onstage world to the virtual world about how to get booked on these gigs, and 11 tips that are really fabulous for the virtual presentations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the thing about getting online speaking gigs is there are really 5 things to think about. Is why does it matter? And who are you talking to? Where do you find them? What do you need to have in place? And how to actually get it done. And once you have that, then the content of that is how do you do the virtual presentations as opposed to the live presentations? But you actually have to get the gig first. And when we're all out there, we're online all day, every day, and our butts hurt because we've been sitting in that chair all day, etc. One of the big questions is, why does it matter? Why should we then go out and look for a speaking gig? And the reason is, especially for your authors and so forth, speaking to promote your book, speaking to promote your services is still one of the very best ways to get clients and increase your revenue. It also gives you credibility. It gives you visibility. To a certain, and it actually, one of the things I do a lot is help getting women onto presentations and webinar series that are mostly filled by men. So, that's the other thing is, so it also helps with parity, because if you're the one who's speaking, you are automatically the expert, known as an expert. The key is, what do you choose? What do you say when and where? Because it does take time. So it is time that needs to be invested. And one of the things that's really a challenge is, how do you get yourself to work on something that is important but not urgent? When, there's Facebook there that's trying to get you to do something urgent. And Or you open up I'm really trying not to open up my email first thing in the morning, because if I do, I'll be answering other people's questions for the first 3 hours instead of doing what I need to do for me. So why it matters is because it positions you as an expert, and it gives people an idea of what you do and what you're about, and also an idea of who you are and how to relate to you as a person. Like your energy is very different from my energy. I hired you because, so you are my coach, and I wanted to work with you as a coach and now as the publisher for my upcoming book, because I liked your energy. Basically, I needed someone who would give me a virtual kick in the butt when I was going off on down a rabbit hole somewhere. So I'm really good at going down rabbit holes.
Yes, she is. But we love her anyway.
Thank you. Well, just, accountability is it's the one thing that makes me do it. I wish I could be accountable to myself, but I'm not. I have to set up accountability for everywhere, which is the how, by the way. So I'll get to that. Mm-hmm. So why it matters, and who are you speaking to, which is, who are your ideal clients? Who are the people who want to buy your book? Who are the people who are going to use your services? Who are the people who need you and they just don't know they need you until they've heard you speak? So that's important. And then where do you find them? And Juliet, I have to thank you about this, because when I first was putting together this whole concept of how do you talk about this, I went down a rabbit hole, and you're the person who said, boom, 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 boom. And oh yeah, right. That you helped me sort out how I wanted to talk about it, which is online. You've got a choice of internet radio shows, mm-hmm. Facebook Live and LinkedIn Live now, and podcasts. So, and then presentations. So the presentations to the people who are, if you're part of a group, on Facebook, or if it's a chamber of commerce or a networking group, whatever. The key is that if you think about internet radio, podcasts, and Facebook Lives, those are evergreen. You never know when someone's going to listen to you. So it's smart of you as a presenter to be presenting something that is not time sensitive. If you're time sensitive, then you want to do something live where people are listening live. And that's where, if you can do this in a networking group where you are sort of endorsed by the host. Mm-hmm. So I'm being endorsed by you, Juliet, because you've invited me onto this, and assuming that you publish it, I am endorsed.
Of course I publish it. Yeah. But I was going to say, you and I are part of the Dames, and, being even on that a couple times a month is a great group of women to be in front of. So I get the feeling sometimes that people are looking for those big audiences, and sometimes those little intimate relationship building audiences can be better for you.
Yeah, exactly. And really, the good thing about the intimate relationship building audiences is you do get the instant gratification. You can offer something and people say yes or no, or I want to have that free consultation. Yes, I want to talk to you about this or that. And you can find people. It helps if you are part of the group and a known part of the group, so that you're a known quantity. For podcasts, now podcasts are great, like this one, and being on a podcast or an internet radio show, it's a great way to get the word out. And then if someone is considering whether they're going to work with you, you can say, well, listen to me. I spoke on Juliet Clark's podcast. So here you can get an idea of what I talk about and get an idea of, if you would respond to my energy. Mm-hmm. So you can also leverage those things. Anything, any place that you have already spoken, it's on the internet forever.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about looking for podcasts is there are a lot of places now that will list, the top 50 podcasts for authors or this or that. Make sure you check them to make sure that they are still broadcasting. You want to talk about pod fade, Juliet?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of pod fade that goes on out there. And for those of you who haven't seen some of our previous episodes, pod fading is when you start a podcast and you don't continue. Elizabeth and I are both well into our podcast, but many people will start, and before they even get to, I think it's episode 13, they're off the air. So yes, make sure, here's another, Elizabeth, too, make sure to listen, because you'd be surprised at how many authors actually try to be on my podcast, and that's not what my podcast is about.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So make sure you know what it's about and who's the audience. What I'm saying here on this podcast is specifically for your audience, because this is what you're supposed to do, is what's going to benefit your audience the best. This is not the same way I would talk about it if I were talking to a group of a corporate group, or a group of corporate people who want to know why they should take the time to get out there and speak. So those are really great ways. The big difference way to think of it is, what's the evergreen that could be listened to at any time? You don't know when they're going to hear you. And what's the one where you've got a live audience? The key to be better at a virtual presentation, goes in as part of this actually, is that nowadays, when so many of us, or most of us, working from home, when you are a guest on a live speaking show and you're doing something, you've got to have interactive content. You've got to have things that people can respond to in the chat. And make sure that you've got the host or someone who is going to be monitoring the chat, because as anyone who has tried to do a screen share can tell you, if you start sharing your screen, you won't see the chat. So you want to be sure that you got someone who can be managing that for you. And you shouldn't be looking at that anyway. So the other part of that is, be aware that you're competing against kids running around and the FedEx person knocking on the door and the phone ringing in the other room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much competition now. And for that matter, just people multitasking. Mm-hmm. So you have to make sure that you are compelling, that you change the energy or the conversation a little bit every 3 or 4 minutes, get people to comment, etc. So that's one of the main things. And then find out who are your favorite groups and who are the ones that you want to, that have the people who need you, so that you can talk about that. The fourth key is, what does the host need? So for instance, Juliet, would you just show us the page that I sent you?
Oh,
yeah.
Sure.
So this is a form that I did, that I sent to Juliet, that has all my social media links. It has the bio, and then it has some other things that you can say. It's not the one I send separately, the specific questions for this.
Yes, you did.
But, yeah.
I don't know.
So I have basically a general one. You want to make sure that you've got a folder on your computer that you can just upload, where they're going to ask you this, and this, and you want to make sure you've got a headshot, and you want to make sure you've got a couple of other shots that you can use. Both Juliet and I, we work with Podfading, who make sure that there are 3 extra pictures in the transcript. So I'm going to give you 3 different pictures of what I do and who I am. And again, it depends on who's the audience for the podcast, which pictures I'm going to send.
Mm-hmm. Can I interject here
Please,
too?
please. Yeah.
My very first podcast that I had back in 2014, 15, and 16 was called Ask Juliet, and it used to drive me crazy. I actually stopped because I had to chase people to
Mm,
get this information. None of them had, back then I did interview authors. None of them had press kits, media kits. It's so important for you to not send it piecemeal. Look professional. I think I have a zip file that I can send out to people, but
hmm.
have it all in one place, and don't tell the host, oh, I sent you my headshot and I'll get you my bio as soon as I write it. Not
Yeah.
not impressive.
Well, the host is your audience too.
Yeah.
So your host is somebody who, you want to impress the host as well. So you want to show up prepared. One of the things that I should have sent you and didn't is to have your bio, a version of your bio in 18-point type that's
Oh.
easy to read. So often what I will do is I will send out a bio. I'll send out a bio that's in 3 sections. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say the short, medium, long. So you've got the 1-sentence version because that's what fits on a post. They're going to post about it and they're going to just put 1 sentence. And then you've got the bio that's maybe 250 words, which is probably what will get published and will be read. But then you also want to have the full bio that says things such as, I'm fluent in 5 languages. I worked hard to do that. It's not always the thing that people read, but the host is going to read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the host might say, oh, and by the way, she speaks 5 languages. Cool. It's not necessarily part of the official post, but it's a little interesting thing that's not exactly the little bit off topic. And it gives people a hook to remember.
You know what? That is so true. And I had a guest back when I first started, 3-page bio.
Oh,
By
God.
the time I read the darn thing, I was like, and that's all we have for today. Thank you. Like, be reasonable about it. I love, Elizabeth sent me the 100 to 200 words. That's usually what I send out as well. It's just long enough to get a good overview, but not so long that we are bored with you before you get on.
Yes, exactly. And the easy thing is just to have a folder on your computer where you have all of this and you can just go click, click. Almost everybody has you apply online. So you just
Mhm.
need to be able to copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste, click to upload, and boom, there it is.
Mhm.
So that's really a very useful thing. Not to mention having something interesting to say. That's a whole other conversation. And if you still don't know what you want to say, send me a message and we'll talk about it. But then the other thing I want to get to is how to actually get yourself to take the time to do it.
Yeah.
One of the things you and I both speak to promoters and podcast hosts around the world. And one of the reasons why you don't see as many women out there on the big stages as men is because women tend to wait. Either they wait to be asked or they wait until they're 150% ready. And so one of the key things is ask, look for it, find a way to do it. What I found is the only thing that really makes me focus and apply for gigs is if I have a partner, and I have an accountability partner. And so what we do is we check in at 5 minutes after the hour every 2 weeks, and then we hang up and we do the application, and then we check in again at 5 minutes before the hour to say, did you actually do it? And knowing that I have that appointment every week is very important. There's another thing that you can do. There's a variation on that theme, which also really helps, is if you have someone whose work you like, and but they're not actually getting out there, you can team up and you can be their assistant twice a month. or once a week. Let's just say that, every Thursday at 10 o'clock, we connect and I say, Juliet, what's the list of who's the people that you want to apply to? And you give me the list, open up a Google Doc, why not? And then I will make the phone calls to say, I'm the assistant for Juliet Clark. She's a fabulous da 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 da. You ought to have her on your podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So that, and then in the meantime, you'll be saying, I'm the assistant for Elizabeth Bachman. And just for 1 hour a week, we're each other's assistants. And that is one of the best ways of doing it, to really get yourself out there. Because isn't it always easier to brag about somebody else?
You're very proactive with this. I do this over on LinkedIn. So this is an education for me as well right now.
Well, my problem is I will find a rabbit hole to go down. I will find a reason to not do it. There's always a reason to not do it. So I need that accountability.
Got it.
Yeah. If I don't have somebody, and there's part of me that says, if I were a better person, I would be accountable to myself. I would keep appointments with myself. But, I'm not. I won't. I finally have to say, all right, it's not going to happen unless I have to face somebody. And if I have to pay somebody to force me to do something that I wouldn't normally do, at least it'll get me to do it.
Wow. Well, I don't know if I'd put that in the category of you're not a better person because you're not doing it. That's going a bit far.
This means I'm human, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I like to think of it as I'm human. It makes me human.
Oh my God, you're the worst. You won't book yourself on podcasts. Oh, we have to go now. Bye.
Yeah. So really it is, why does it matter? Because it gives you credibility. It gives you exposure to people who might hire you. Who are you talking to? Do you find the right people? Where do you find them? What do you have to have ready so that when you apply and they say yes, you can just go click, 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 here it is. And then how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And don't be surprised when you get a gig. I have to tell you, when I first started my Ask Juliet, I reached out I just read Dory Clark's book. I just loved her. And my coach back then was making me reach out to have podcast guests. I was brand new at this. And Dory said yes. And I literally got on the phone with my coach and I was like, what do I do now? Somebody said yes.
Wow, you got Dory Clark. I've been trying to get Dory Clark for a while now.
She's a very, very smart, very, very smart lady.
And very busy lady, yes.
Yes, she is. I think she's a lot busier now than she was back when I interviewed her, but she's a very good interview. But it was that thing. I was like, what now? Because I wasn't prepared. So it was very, very, very interesting with that. So
one of the things is suggest things that they can ask you. That's helpful.
Yes. But here's the thing you can suggest things that they ask you, but don't tell them how to run the show. Because that can be really annoying sometimes. Here are some suggested topics, which I always appreciate. A lot of times I have my own questions and want my own conversation, but when the guest tries to control it, it's really annoying too. And I don't know that I would have someone back again that did that. Another thing is having those pre-interviews. I don't know about you on your podcast, but I learned the hard way. I had 2 people that were recommended that there was no rapport. And they were all early 20-something. I call them kids because my kids are that age, but there just wasn't that warm, fuzzy, relationship building because they're in a little bit different world. And so now I pre-interview, and a lot of people get really upset about it. Why do you need to do that? You're just assuming I'm a bad guest, but it's not that at all. A lot of it's, do we have chemistry?
Well, and that also is where you start building the relationship, because the podcast or the speech is not just you're done and then you put it on the shelf and you go. We want to talk about that. You're Miss Marketing expert. it's part of a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can address that one, Julia. That's very important.
It is, and I think there were a couple things going on there with that. Is there? I think there's a certain age group out there, and maybe I'm making some invalid assumptions here, but that are more click oriented than relationship oriented. And so I think especially in COVID, that is the gift of being baby boomers and the generation after us. Is we were forced. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. We were forced to talk to each other. And I think that's what people are looking for during COVID, is that relationship building. And there's a generation or two that just don't have those skills.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that might be, but if you are using speaking to grow your business, then the best clients are the ones who come from relationships. Unless you're the kind of person who's trying to sell 50,000 widgets a day and you don't care who buys them. But you and I mostly work with service-based businesses. So, and we're both in a service-based business. So we really want the relationships with the clients, and then the clients who will hopefully buy more from us next time and buy more and so forth.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And it's interesting you said that, because I think that almost every industry I've ever been in has been service related, from publishing to, God knows, advertising is. I mean, for any of you who've ever watched Bewitched, it's true. It's true. Like, the client is always right, even when they're not. I just gave the lovely Alexandra Hazard her first voodoo doll, because that's what we had when we were in advertising, because you'd literally get off the phone and go, I can't make that happen. I hate you. And then you turn around and you make it happen.
Yes. Well, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I need that. Maybe I need a conflict coach now. No, but it really is. I think every single industry I've ever been in has been very service oriented, and I think that serves people to be in those kinds of industries, because you really have to understand your clients. And make things happen that sometimes you don't think you'd be able to. But the gift of that is that you push the envelope and you figure out how to make it happen. So as much as I'd like to beat that voodoo doll, I learned some very, very valuable lessons and skills from that. So,
well, I liked what you said, is they beat the voodoo doll and then figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, and then figure out how to do it. Yeah. So, Elizabeth, where can we find you if we want to find out more about this transition and getting gigs and the whole ball of wax? How do we get a hold of you?
Well, there's a lot of ways to find me. One of the things you can do is see how your presentation skills are rocking it. And that's where you might need a little support at my quiz, which is the speakforresultsquiz.com. It's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And you can go to my podcast, Speakers Who Get Results. Easiest way to find it is on my website, elizabethbachman.com/podcast. And there you can see all the things that I've talked about. And there is a podcast version of this, How Do You Get the Right Online Speaking Gigs? So that actually has pictures. So if you need to look at the slides and actually write things down, that's where that is.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on today. This was super helpful.
Thank you, Juliet. I'm just working with you has been one of the smartest things I ever did. So I'm just delighted to be your client and your friend.
You guys, I swear I don't pay these people to say this. Mullen just did the same thing on hers. I swear.
Am I just saying what all the others say?
Oh gosh, now I don't feel special. Bring it on. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, if you really want to know what I really think about Juliet, that's separately, not on the podcast. Okay. I love working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.